hotel. It was on the corner of Hollywood and Vine, which is supposed to be the hot corner in
Yeah,
Hollywood.
yeah.
Yeah.
How long were you out there? How many days?
8 days, 7 nights.
And did you go on set? Did you get to see them actually film or?
No, the day after that we were there, they left and went to England. It was shot in England, you know.
No, I thought it was shot. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So
They,
you got to meet the crew, like the cast and the.
oh yeah, I have some pictures there.
Okay.
For 3 hours we sat and talked to the cast.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, my fiance would be extremely jealous that you got to meet Brad Pitt. So.
Yeah, they shot it in England because there's a German Tiger tank.
The last running Tiger tank
Yeah.
in the world, right?
And that's in that museum in England. So that's what we're pretty much had to.
They had to do it there.
Yeah.
And they brought that tank out just for this movie.
Yeah.
They let it run for a little
It
bit.
must have cost Sony a ton of money, I'll bet.
Oh yeah.
And then of course they have some Shermans that are operable. I don't know if there's many even Shermans operable in this country today. You see a lot of them around, but I don't know how operable they are.
There's a lot of Shermans and a lot of tanks in general in U.S., but they're all museum status.
Yeah.
There's one, there's a huge collection in Carlisle at the barracks. They have tanks. I believe they have a Sherman. I know they have a Sherman. I believe they have an M3.
Oh, is there Carlisle?
Yeah. They have. I mean, they have a collection of field artillery. They have helicopters. They have a lot there. All out in a kind of basically a huge field.
You're not talking about Aberdeen, Maryland.
No, those moved actually.
Yeah, I heard that they moved,
The
Andy.
collection is now in Fort Lewis, which is in Virginia.
Oh, is
They
it?
pulled them all inside. There's only 2 or 3 pieces down in Aberdeen now.
Uh-huh.
The War College, the Army War College, where they train the officers.
Yeah.
In Carlisle.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
I've been
where
there
they
a
have-
lot of times.
That's where they have the major collection of
Oh.
some tanks or something. So if you're ever heading out west, I haven't stopped yet. I've driven past it a couple
Yeah.
times, but I've never been able to stop. But I know they're all arranged out in the field. And they're kind of, you have World War II, and then you walk a path, and you come up to Korea, and then Vietnam, and
Oh, no. See, I didn't know that. I didn't, unless they weren't there the years I were there. I would go there for information
okay.
in the museum and stuff like that.
Okay. I've never been out. I've driven past it, like I said, but I've never been able to stop and
Uh-huh.
just kind of walk around. It's one of my things on my
Yeah.
to-do list. So, but if you're ready,
I'm
ready
ready.
to get started. Okay. So let me get this here. Okay. So what I normally have you do is just start with who you are, where you served, and what you did during the war, and then I'll ask some questions afterwards.
Okay, my name is Don Evans. I was born 1923 in Phoenixville. I went into the service October the 15th, 1942, and I served with the 2nd Armored Division in North Africa, Sicily, France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany. I was wounded twice. I was wounded in Operation Cobra, the breakout of Normandy. Then I was wounded and became a blind PW March the 31st up in Germany.
So you went in 42. Were you Did you enlist or were you drafted?
Yeah, I enlisted. I never wanted to. I never wanted to be drafted. You know, so to speak, I never wanted my country to have to drag me in. And then when I did get in, of course, everybody had a serial number. You know, mine was 13151545. And if your first digit was a 1, that meant that you had enlisted, and you became regular Army. If your first digit was a 3, it meant that you were drafted. And so when you get in during basic training, you know, you have roll call a lot, and like they'd call out Evans, and I'd answer Donald F. 13151545. So everybody knows who's drafted and who's enlisted. But once you get in, everything's the same, you know. And so you grumble and growl and gripe when everybody else does. And then the draftees would say, well, what are you crying about? You asked for it. Then I'd say, yeah, but my country didn't have to drag me in.
How old were you? Were you 18 right out of high school?
I was 19. I just turned 19. I had to go to Philadelphia to enlist. I went into Phoenixville the day that I enlisted, and the biggest group of draftees that leave the Phoenixville area got on the train to go to New Cumberland, and 4 guys that I lived with in Joe Hollow down outside of Valley Forge, they were drafted and they went on that. And then I just thought, well, if they're gone, I'll just enlist. So I had a 1937 Chevy and I drove to Philadelphia. You had to go to Philadelphia to the customs house. So I drove down there and climbed the stairs and went in the room there. And I always wanted to be in the Air Corps. I had seen a movie, of course we didn't have TV then, but I saw this movie, Andy. It was called International Squadron. And it was a story of a B-17. And the 10 men on that plane were all from a different allied nation. And the guy that would represent the United States at that time on that plane was a guy by the name of Ronald Reagan. So when I got to Philly, I went down by myself and I climbed the stairs and went in the room, and the room was just full of guys waiting to enlist, you know. And I saw this big banner across the far wall, and it said, join the Army Air Corps and you get a chance to go into Texas, California, or Kentucky for your basic training. And I saw that word California. Andy, in those days, California to us on the East Coast was the enchanted land. And hardly everybody went there because, you know, wasn't a lot of planes flying in and you didn't have the money to go. So, man, I said, that's for me. I got in line and the guy said, what do you want? And I said, I want to join the Air Corps. And he said, do you want to fly or do you want the ground crew? Oh, I was 19 years old, you're gung-ho, you know, you think you know it all and you're brave. And I said, I want to be a gunner. That's what I wanted to be, was 50 caliber gunner up there. And then he handed me some papers and he said, fill these out, take them home and fill them out and get your parents to sign them and come back. And why that was, I don't know, because I was of age, but that's what he told me. And I saw the crowd there and I said, well, I'm just not going to come back here again tomorrow. I'm going to drive to Philadelphia. So I just threw the papers in the can and went back and got in line, another line. And there's 2 things I really didn't want was the infantry, you know, because they carried a load. Them guys get shot up. And I really didn't want armor because, you know, you might be safe from a 30 caliber, but they got the big stuff. And then when they get hit, they burn. And I didn't want that. But I knew that was the lesser of the 2 evils. So then I took my physical and passed my physical that day. And then we had 11 days to get our affairs in order and went back to Philly and then shipped out.
So you knew going into it, did you know then when you enlisted that you'd be on a tank?
I didn't know what I would be. I wanted to be a gunner and I didn't care what kind of a gunner. I just thought that was the thing, man, to be behind a gun. You don't think at that time, but the other guy has a gun too. But then I was shipped out to Camp Camel. Well, I went to New Cumberland. You know where New Cumberland is. I went there for, I guess, 3 or 4 days I was there. Then I was shipped out to Camp Camel, Kentucky. That was a new camp, and they were just forming the 12th Armored Division. And so I went into the 12th Armored Division. I just took some basic. Then the Germans were kicking the Americans up and down the Jebels and Wadis there in North Africa. So a lot of us were sent out as a replacement. So then when I got to North Africa, then I became a member of the 2nd Armored Division, Hell on Wheels.
When like time frame, when did you get to Africa?
I got to Africa the 13th day of April, 1943.
Go ahead.
I left New York Harbor on April the 1st, which was April Fool's Day. But Uncle Sam wasn't joking. And then, of course, we were 13 days going across the submarine-infested Atlantic Ocean. And then we went through, of course, you don't know where you're going, but we were on an old British ship called the HMS Athlone Castle. And just, guys were just jammed in there. The bunks were 5 high wooden bunks. And nobody wanted the top bunk, too high to climb. Nobody wanted the bottom bunk because the guy on top gets sick. You know, he leans over and it splashes on the floor. So I got about the 2nd or the 3rd up, I guess. And then after a bit, after we're over there at sea, I guess for 12 days, and then they told us then that we were stopping, we were going through the Straits of Gibraltar, and they said that they were going to open the submarine nets so that the convoy could go through. You know, they had those nets across there, keep the submarines, German submarines. But I saw the Rock of Gibraltar, Andy. Never in my life did I ever think I'd see the Rock of Gibraltar. Man, I was amazed. The only thing I heard about the Rock of Gibraltar was the Prudential Life Insurance Company. They had their logo. Do you remember that? Prudential has the strength of Gibraltar. Yeah. Yeah, I was just tickled, man, to see the Rock of Gibraltar.
You never thought you'd be able to travel the world and head out to Africa?
No, never thought I'd go to Africa, but that's where the fighting was then. And that's where all the armor was, because the Germans had the armor.
What, before you left to go overseas, what had you heard about the war? To a lot of people, the war was in Europe. It was so far away. What were your thoughts, or what have you heard about
it? Excuse me. I don't know if we really thought a whole lot about it, because at that time, I think most of us were focused on the Pacific, because that's where a lot of the fighting was then. You know, North Africa was the first fighting for American in the European theater. But it was because that we were in armor's reason they had shipped us to North Africa.
Did you have any, were you nervous on the ship ride over, or did you have any expectation?
Well, you were. You know, the first thing they do, you're told where your lifeboat station is, and they show you that. And then every day they would have a lifeboat drill. And when that drill would sound, you would go to that station wearing your life jacket. But you know, after about 3 or 4 times, it gets to be humdrum and there's nothing going on. Of course, you don't know whether it's a false alarm or dry run, you know. So after about 3 or 4 days, then you don't pay it any mind. You know, the guys are just lollygagging around. And then one day, the Navy was dropping depth charges. Maybe it wasn't anything going on. Maybe they were practicing. But it kind of woke everybody up. You know, then you'd stay on the stick. Because you'd stand there at the rail and look down, man. You just didn't want to have to bail out, man, getting that water drowned or whatever.
So when you arrived in Africa, what happened? Where did you go? What did you do?
Well, I went to North Africa, and we went in the Mediterranean, and we went into the port of Mirs El Kabir. It was a big-time French naval base, and that's where we unloaded, and then we went to a replacement center in that area. And I remember the day we were getting unloaded, they said, "Don't pack your overcoat. You know, carry your overcoat with you." And of course, the GI, you know, he knows everything. And man, this is Africa. All we need an overcoat for, you know. But it got very cold there. You go in a replacement center, and you had these big pyramidal tents. I guess they were made to seat 6, but the war's on, and 10 of them are in there, you know. And you're with guys then you don't know, because they split you all up. So that's where they put us. And we were there, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks, just kind of training. And then the units that were fighting in North Africa, or had been North Africa before us, needed replacements. They would come to the replacement center and then call out your name, and then you would become a member of that division. That's when I became a member of the 66th Armored Regiment of the 2nd Armored Division. But while we were there and training, you know, you do a lot of double time and stuff like that, and bayonet drill, and you would double time for 2 miles out and then 2 miles back. And the first time you ever saw Arabs, you never thought there was anybody so filthy or disgusting looking in your life as an Arab. And they would sit on the stone walls and watch you and think you were crazy. Yeah. So that was our first taste of Arabs too.
What was those 3 weeks like where you were training? What were were you excited? Were you ready to go to war? Were you ready to get on your tank and go into battle, or were you?
No, we really didn't know, while we were there training, we really didn't know what kind of a unit in an armored division we were going into. Whether you're going to be in a tank company or if you're going in reconnaissance like I was, you know, if you were going in reconnaissance at that time, it was early in the war, you had half tracks and stuff like that. But you didn't know exactly what.
So then you ended up on a half track?
Yeah, because I went in reconnaissance.
So what was, what were your duties? What did you do in North Africa?
Well, I was a gunner on a half track. Yeah, the gun was mounted on a thing that they called a skate, 30 caliber, and that track ran 3/4 the way around the half track, and you could just walk it around. Yeah, I kind of liked that. As I was a gunner.
That's what you wanted. You got what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I didn't care what kind of a gunner. Yeah, all I wanted to do was pull the trigger and kill the other guy. Yeah, but when you come face to face with the other guy, he has the same idea, you know. He has somebody to kill too.
When did that happen? When did you first come? When was your first taste of combat? When were you first in battle?
Well, then the war ended. I didn't see any action in North Africa, but the war ended, and then we started taking a lot of amphibious training, and I kind of thought that we would go to Greece because the Brits were fighting the Germans down in Greece, and I didn't think Sicily was on some of our minds. But I didn't think that we would go to Sicily because I thought with the big German guns, you know, they could bombard Sicily from Italy. So we wound up though going to Sicily. They don't tell you where you're going till you're out there a couple of days. You know, then they tell you where you're going and what to do and all this and that. And
so you were part of the invasion into Italy.
Sicily. Yeah, and we had passed the Isle of Malta, and Malta at that time was the most bombed place on earth because he who controls Malta controls the airways and the seaways from North Africa to Italy or Sicily. Yeah, so the Germans kept bombing that all the time because the British Navy was there and the British Air Force. So they just bombed the Isle of Malta, man, night and day. So then when I got to Africa, of course I didn't know anybody when I joined the company, and I didn't know anybody, and they put you in a pup tent with another guy, and you know, they're only about that wide, you know, and it's just room enough for you and another guy. It's not room enough for you and another guy, and then of course your equipment is in there, and I had gotten the guy that I was in the tent with was John Marco, and he was from Central City, Pennsylvania. But John never washed and he never talked. So then they took me out of there. I finally got out of there, and when they finally put me on a half track, then I was put with another guy. And the first night there, we're sitting out in the field eating the chow, and I was sitting on the ground, and over there was a couple other guys, and they were talking. And one guy says, "Where are you from?" And the guy says, "I'm from Pennsylvania." And he said, "Where are you from?" Well, I forget where he was from. And then they broke up and went their way. And so I said to the guy, I said, "Where are you from in Pennsylvania?" And he said, "I'm from Norristown." And I said, "Oh." And then Norristown, he said, "Well, really," he said, "I'm not from Norristown." He said, "I'm from Phoenixville." He said, "Nobody ever heard of Phoenixville, so I tell everybody I'm from Norristown." So I said I was from Valley Forge, 2 or 3 miles from there, and that's where I went to high school. So he told me what his name was. His name was Harry Such. And I said, "Oh, I worked in a defense factory with a girl by the name of Mary Such. Such a place, and this happened to be his sister." But the first day in Sicily, there was a lot of German aircraft in. You know, it was early in the war. And I was up on deck. We were getting ready to go ashore. And here come a German plane out of the island, you know, and I could see them 20 millimeter just going like that, the shells twinkling, and there's a lot going on. Our Navy's firing, all that's all kind of noise, but you knew he was firing. You could see them shells twinkling, you know. They came straight for our ship, man. He went across that thing, and I was up the front there, man. I ducked down behind a lot of machinery, scared to death, boy. And them LSTs were only about that thick. And them things that go through them and through the deck. But none of our guys were killed on that strafing, except this guy Harry Such. He wasn't killed, but he was wounded. So then of course, we went ashore then.
Was that your first sight of the Germans?
Yeah.
The first time you saw them?
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you think? What were your, how did you feel about the Germans before?
Well, we really admired the Germans because they had already been in the war a while, and they were fighting the Brits in North Africa, and they were already at war in Russia. But there was a lot of Italians fighting too in Sicily, and they were a big ally, of the Germans. But we didn't. We met mostly, I guess, in Sicily, a lot of Italians, and they had a lot of relatives in America, And when things got hot, they just kind of threw down the gun, They really didn't want to fight. The Germans got stuck with them, so to speak. But I guess we were only 2 or 3 weeks, I guess, fighting on the island, and then the rest of the summer, we done garden bridges and stuff like that from sabotage by civilians and stuff like that. And it was just great we were there all summer. Most of the time, you would be out on an outpost. Like a lot of times, we were on an outpost down on the Mediterranean. You'd spend pretty much all the day, with shorts and laying on the beach and stuff like that. And or you'd be in town, and you really got along good with the Italians. All of them said, "Where you from?" And then they'd tell you where they had relatives, and it was kind of nice. And then we had a big German gasoline dump. It was covered with a big net. So, I mean, just acres of 5-gallon cans and also 50-gallon drums. And for some reason, America never used their gasoline in their vehicles. We used to use it when we were burning the garbage and stuff like that. But we happened to be guarding one of those dumps one time for a couple of weeks, I guess. And of course, the Italians, they wanted that gasoline to run their mills to grind their olives and stuff like that, So then we would trade off the 5-gallon can, for a big bowl of chicken and spaghetti and stuff like that. Yeah, so life was good, man, on Sicily. Yeah, then November we turned in all our equipment and got aboard of a ship and set sail and went to England.
Did you know why you were going to England? Did you know why you were going to England?
Oh, we knew we were going to England. Oh, there was no question. Everybody knew that eventually you were going to France, Yeah, of course we didn't know. We didn't know at the time. We really thought that we were going back to the States. We thought we had seen a little bit of action. Man, we had seen it, so we're done. They were going to send us home. And I don't recall how long we were out in the Atlantic. Then we landed up in Scotland. Then we boarded the train and went down to England, and then we spent our time there in England training before we went into France.
And I imagine England was much different than Sicily or being in the Mediterranean.
Oh yeah, the language, was the big thing. Yeah, you could get along good. You could go into town there and buy stuff at the stores. It wasn't a whole lot. The Brits didn't have anything either,
What kind of training? What training did they? What were you doing for training? What did they have you do?
Well, we done pretty much, I guess, the training we had done before. But when we got to England, then, see, we left our equipment back in Sicily, and what happened to that equipment before we turned it in? We scraped it all down and repainted it, and then they gave it to the Free French. It was the Free French outfit, fighting in the war. So that equipment that we turned in, they got to use that in Europe, and we got all new equipment. Instead of having a lot of half-tracks in, they replaced those with armored cars, those old armored cars with the turrets on. Not much, but that's the way it is with reconnaissance. Everything is light and lightly armored, because always speed is of the essence. And
so did you move into a light car then when you got to?
Yeah.
Still the gunner? still a gunner?
Yeah. Yeah. And our barracks was located, it was called Tidworth Garrison. It was 85 miles south of London. Big brick encampment, old one. And then when we got there, we were allowed a 7-day furlough to go to London or to Glasgow, Scotland, or whatever. Then they had such a thing as a 6-hour pass. You could get on the truck at camp at 4 o'clock at night, and they'd take you to town, like our town was Salisbury. And then you would get on the truck in Salisbury at 10 o'clock to come home. And we were stationed right now. I don't know if you ever heard of the Standing Stones. Excuse me. What was another name? Another name for the Standing Stones. It was them odd-looking stones. Have been in England for years.
In a circle? Yeah, the ones that are arranged in a circle?
Yeah.
Stonehenge?
Stonehenge. Yeah. Yeah, we were right near there. Yeah, in fact, our rifle range was out in that area. Yeah.
What so you were in Europe for 8 months?
In England?
Yeah.
No, we got there in December, and then we left in June.
So when did
Well, by 7 months, yeah.
When did you go into? You didn't go into France June 6th. Did you go in after Normandy? After a couple days after the invasion?
Yeah, we went in on D3. You can't land an armored division on a beach on D-Day. Too much equipment, Of course, they landed some tanks from tank battalions and stuff like that.
Did you guys? I mean, were you aware that in the couple months before June, did you know that this invasion was happening?
Oh yeah, yeah. You knew when the time was drawing near. Yeah, there was times that you would be restricted to camp and all that stuff.
You had a feeling. You guys knew. You didn't know exactly where you were going to go in, but you knew it was coming.
No. But it was the good life there. You slept indoors and stuff like that. From the time we got to North Africa, till we landed in England, it was either on the ground or under the ground that you were sleeping.
So before going into Normandy, you hadn't seen much combat. Just
No.
a couple weeks, right?
Yeah.
Did you think going through France and going to the heart of Germany would be kind of the same? Were you ready for the intensity of fighting?
Well, I don't know if we were ready for the intensity of fighting or not, because we really didn't think that it would be. We knew that it wasn't going to be like it was in Sicily. But now there was some of the Americans that fought in the northern part of the island where it goes close to the boot. And the Germans were up there, and they had a tough time up there. But we went we had the job of taking the capital city of Palermo, and that pretty much wound up the fighting for us. But we had, one of the things that we came across on one of our recon trips on the island was it was a railroad tunnel, and the Germans had turned it into an ammo dump. And when we came across that thing and saw what it was, we kind of went in there a little bit and saw what it was, and they had all kinds of stuff there. Coast artillery shells, any kind of size shell for anything you think of in that tunnel. All of it racked up neatly in piles, stacked. And I can remember there's just one line of electricity coming through there on the ceiling with the bulbs hanging from it, So then what you do when you're in, you do the recon, you come across something like that, then you get on the radio and you call your headquarters and tell them about this or that. And that town was right near a town that was big in The Godfather. It started with a C. I'm sure it did.
In France?
No, in Sicily.
In Sicily. Calibri or
Wasn't Calabria. Oh, did you see any of the Godfather movies?
It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been.
It's big in my family. The Godfather is very big. I come from an Italian family, so it's a very big movie.
But it was in one of them Godfather movies that the guy, I guess, when he was in America and then he goes back to Sicily, and that's the town he goes to. Yeah, that was where that ammunition dump was.
So as part of reconnaissance, you operate, forward of the tanks. I mean, how far do you go in advance of everybody?
Oh yeah.
How far forward do you normally go?
Well, you generally go till the day runs out, or you run into opposition, or till they call you back. Like Sicily, maybe sometimes you'd run most of the day. Yeah, and then of course, in that part, like I say, there was a lot of the Italian army, and a lot of those guys would give up.
So then in Europe, I mean, there was a lot more resistance, a lot more of a fight put up by the Germans.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
You didn't make it. You didn't go as far in advance of the American lines.
No, not till later on in the war.
So stepping back a couple weeks, going into Normandy, what was Normandy like? I mean, 3 days after the invasion, was there still a little fighting, or was the beach?
Oh yeah, there was not far in off the beach there was the fighting, but all the rubble and the sunken ships and stuff was all there. It was just an awful looking mess. Nothing but wreckage on the beaches, and yeah, and you just wouldn't believe it. It was like I said when I first got to Africa, and we got up in the part of North Africa where we left North Africa to go to Sicily and Tunisia. We left out of the port of Bizerte. I just couldn't believe, Andy, all the American ships and stuff was up there. Man, we were 5,000 or 6,000 miles from home, and man, all that American stuff, it was just unbelievable. And then when we got to England, everywhere there was something piled. They had half tracks and crates piled 2 and 3 high, and tanks lined up, man, like they're in a parking lot, and all kinds of ammunition, stacks and stacks of rations. There wasn't an empty spot in England, man, that there wasn't something piled there by the Americans. Unbelievable. America then was known as the arsenal of democracy. And we made everything in America. And not only for the Americans, but for the Brits and all of our allies, the French and stuff like that, was all made in America. Unbelievable what this country produced. And you saw the ships that were off the coast there for miles, battleships and landing craft, and yeah, it just blows your mind to think what America produced.
That's what Germany and Japan didn't really expect, was the sheer amount of equipment and production we could ramp up, and it was monumental.
Well, of course, when we went into Sicily, we went on LST number 1. LST was landing ship tanks. Of course, there was trucks and other stuff on there. That was LST number 1, and it was made in Pittsburgh by the Dravo Corporation.
They floated them right down the river. I wasn't too far from where they built those.
Oh, is that right?
I lived, maybe 20, 30 minutes away from where they built those ships. Yep.
Yeah.
They float them down the river and down to the Mississippi, and then down into New Orleans.
Yeah, that's right, down to New Orleans. Yeah.
Pittsburgh was big in the
in
that part. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have a couple. If I remember correctly, they still have a couple on display, and they have one in a museum in Pittsburgh.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, because it was a symbol of the Normandy invasion with these landing craft. So yeah, they're Pittsburgh built. But when you got to Normandy, were you part of a CARSTO or recon team?
Oh yeah, I stayed in recon then after that.
Did you drive? So you were a gunner on these like the recon team, scout cars?
Yeah. And then they started doing away with so many scout cars and replaced them with light tanks. Yeah. Yeah, it was a ton different when you got to Normandy. Old Jerry was dug in, man. He wasn't backing off. we were in Normandy a long time before we ever broke out. Because of the hedgerows, you couldn't use your tanks and stuff. Yeah. And then a lot of the French weren't too friendly. Of course, the Germans were there for 4 years, occupied the land, and they were good to the French out on the coast where the farms were and stuff. And a lot of the French got along with them, not all of them, but.
So
Yeah.
when did you first get into a light tank?
I didn't get into a light tank till we got further, I guess, during the breakout.
And that was like July?
Yeah, that was July the 26th or 27th, something like that.
What so at this point, I mean, you had been in half tracks and cars. What was the tank? Were you excited to be in a tank?
Oh, yeah. 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 Because the half track and the cars don't have any roofs on them, you know.
What were you still the gunner on the tank?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And did you shoot now on the you were in a light tank, the steering
Yeah.
tank, correct?
Yeah.
Those have gun ports. They have one gun on top and then two shooting out the front, right?
Yeah, you had two guns in the turret, and then you had a machine gun down front where the system driver sat. Yeah.
Which did you run?
I run the two in the turret.
Right. So you're now pushing across France and deeper into Europe. When did you? I mean, how soon into it did you really come across some intense fighting?
Well, even when we got into Normandy, you know, they always had something for recon to do. If you didn't have reconnaissance with the vehicles, you know, you went on foot, and often we went dug the holes and went into the ground like the infantry. Yeah, it's always like that for recon. Yeah, they always had something for you to do. Yeah, and then of course, you know, you were getting shelled all the time, and the mortars plopping on you, and then we used to grumble and growl, you know, because we were armor. How come we're out here dug in with the infantry? And yeah, and then when the tanks would come up and they would take their position, it would be us guys that have to get out there and outpost the tanks, not them guys. Yeah.
When did you first see a German tank?
Oh, Normandy. Yeah. Yeah, it was quite different. And we'd go out on one of, I guess, our first recon missions that we went out on Normandy was on foot. And of course, the Germans had minefields everywhere and all that kind of stuff. And there was a lot of churches in Normandy. And so the first thing you do, you know, knock the steeples off of them, so they can't use them for observation. And we were on a thing there, about 5 or 6 of us, I guess, and going through the hedgerows there. And I can remember saw a little sign stuck down in the grass there, and it was about this long and about this high, I guess, stuck down the ground, and it had the death's head on there, and then it says Achtung, Minen. It was a German minefield. When they plant those mines, they mark them so they know where they are. But when they leave them, they're supposed to take up them little signs, you know, so you can't see it. But when I saw that, and man, my heart was in my mouth, man. I didn't know whether to go this way or don't. I didn't go anywhere.
Just kind of freeze and don't make
You
don't
do.
make a step.
Yeah. And then we saw that church in the distance, and it still had the steeple on it. And so then we all hit the ground, and I also had carried a radio, and I had taken some artillery training to call artillery. So then I called, your artillery will have a map, something like that you'll have, and when you call in the numbers that are on this map, they have the same thing, and you'll say coordinates 64, 71 or whatever, then they look at their map and they know how to set the guns, you know. And then they'll put them shells over, and them shells come over there and hitting in that churchyard. And then you can see, well, before that, we saw the juries digging in the churchyard. Yeah, we were back there behind the hedgerows, and we could see them with their shovels, man, digging in. Then we called that artillery, and Krauts running everywhere. Yeah, we knocked that steeple down. Yeah.
So when were you were hit twice, correct?
Pardon?
You were wounded twice, right? You came under fire twice?
Yeah, I got wounded the 29th of July, right after the breakthrough.
What happened that first time?
I really did, well, our vehicle got knocked out and we bailed out, and then the guy scattered, and it was just a bad day. It was the worst day I think I ever had in the war, and Germans were shooting everything, dropping mortars and artillery, and our guys were doing the same thing. It was just a bad day, and guys would be, running around scared to death and didn't know what they were doing, and so I don't know how I got away from the vehicle, but I got into one of these sunken lanes. Now even the jury can't see you in there. He knows you're in there because that's a place to hide. So they shell them and rake them with machine guns. So I myself, I started up that sunken road, and I knew if I was going to live that day, I had to get out of that sunken lane. And I start up there and I see two guys from our platoon, new guys. I knew their names, but I don't think I'd ever talked to them. And they were the hedgerows are about 4 foot high. I don't know if you've probably seen pictures of them. And then on top of them are the hedges and the trees. And the roots are interwoven in that big embankment there. And the only way that you can get out of there is to kind of get up that embankment and get through the trees. But these two guys were just huddled up against that embankment, just scared to death. And when I saw them, I just kind of got up there close to them. I said, and they weren't even talking, they were so scared. I said, if we're going to live, we're going to have to get out of this sunken lane. And they just kind of nodded their head. And I said, they had never seen any action before. I said, you follow me. I said, we'll see if we can't get out of here. So we go up the hedgerow, and the Germans will be shelling in, and the machine guns going off, and our guys will be firing. And then we'd hit the ground when we heard a shell coming in. Then we'd get up and run a little more till I saw an opening in the hedgerow. So then I mentioned to them guys, I said, we're going to go through that opening. So then we got up there to where that opening was, and a couple more shells come in, so we hit the ground again. And then just as soon as they've exploded, I'm up the bank to go through that hole in that hedgerow. And just as I got to the top of the bank, another shell hit up there. And just kind of threw me through that opening. Down on the other side, I tumbled on the other side. I was wounded, but not seriously. But I didn't look back. But I knew that I was wounded. And then the medics were there and picked me up and took me out of there and took me to a big first aid tent, big tent. And I went in there and they set the litter on the ground. Inside that big tent, all on the inside edge, is litters with the wounded. And then down through the center, they'll have things maybe about this high, 30 inches high, something like that. They're something like, what would I say? They're kind of a rough thing made to fit a litter, where they could sit the litter on there, then they operate on you. That was down the center. Then there was some GI nurses in there, women nurses, Then they operated on me. I remember they gave me a shot of Pentothal. I never had Pentothal before, but it was the best feeling, man. Man, you just kind of floated out of there. And when I woke up, I didn't have any clothes on, but I was on another litter and covered with a blanket. And then I was in another tent, and there was a few guys in that. They all had just come out of the operating room. And then the C-47, the cargo plane, would come in and land in the field right alongside a tent. Then they would load you up and hang you on racks inside the C-47. But I was fortunate enough to get one near one of the little windows there, and I could look out when we were flying out of Normandy. And I could look down there, and I saw that hedgerow country and stuff. And I remember the times we used to being careful to cover ourselves so the jury planes wouldn't see us. And man, up there, of course, this plane is flying slow and low, And man, you knew then, man, that camouflage wasn't doing you much good. And this is what I said getting out of there. I just laid there and literally looking out the window. I said, man, I'm glad I'm getting out of here, and I hope I never have to come back. Boy, was I glad to get out of there and get to England.
Where were you hit?
I just got some shrapnel in the back and in my hands and in my knee. Yeah. $1 million wounds, man. Everybody wants a $1 million wound to get you out of action for a while, you know, so you can get a bed to sleep on, get some hot chow.
How, you mentioned the two guys who were huddled up, kind of out of fear. What gives you the strength to run under fire and to get those guys out of there? How do you, when you're...
Well, the medics, we just kind of, when there was a little break in the shelling, we'd get up and run and then hit the ground. And I never looked back to see if they came through the thing or not. But when I got back to the company, then in September, I said, what happened to Olson and Paulson? One boy's name was Gilbert Olson, the other one Laverne Paulson. They said that they were killed. They never got through that hole. The same shell that wounded me and blew me through that hole wounded them, killed them. And when we hit the ground, Andy, we were that close that our bodies was touching one another. And I will give God the credit for that, man.
In a matter of
God
inches.
spared me. I was slightly wounded, but killed both of those. Yeah, and I thought about them a lot of years after the war. And then there was a place down in Arlington, Virginia, where you could write and get information. I forget what it was called. And I looked up to see what had happened to them. You know, they were both shipped back to the States, and all that information would tell you where they shipped in the States and the private cemetery and who in the family picked up the remains, you know, at the train station. Yeah. Yeah.
Was that the first time you had, you had been that close to somebody who was killed?
Oh, no. And I can remember, too, that day before we got hit, because of the intense shelling, a lot of guys will crack up, you know, and they just throw their gun down and just walk anywhere, walk around circles, and a lot of them are crying. And that was one thing, and I wasn't any braver than anybody else, but that one thing I was so thankful for, you know, that I didn't crack up.
What do you think gave you that ability to remain calm under fire?
I don't know. I wasn't a Christian at the time. You know, I believed there was a God, and I, like everybody else, you know, prayed to God. But when you're praying to God, you know, God knows it all, and He's over all. When you're in the ground and you're praying, God, you're praying, man, that you don't get hit, and God knows that. He knows that you're praying for your physical well-being, not your spiritual. You know, you're not praying, God, save me. You're praying, God, save my body. Then when that's over, Andy, you're out the same old way. You know, you're cussing and swearing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So you got to Europe and you were there until September? So a couple months, you said?
Yeah, I left up there in August and got back over up in Holland. Then on the company was up in Holland at the time. That was in September.
Did you think when you were flying out of Normandy the first time, did you think that was it? You're not coming back?
Yeah, I thought, man, once you're wounded, man, they're going to ship you to the States. You've seen it. No, it's like on any job you're on, man. They want you if you have experience. And you know, they loaded us on a little ship. It was a British ship, and we were to go to Omaha Beach to drop you off. Of course, this after all fighting is all gone now, you know. But they landed us on the other beach was Utah. We laid there all afternoon in that hot sun with our stuff, waiting for a truck to come to pick us up to take us where we were supposed to go, a replacement center, and we were at the wrong place. Finally, when it got dark, a truck came and kind of picked us up. Now the war is well up into France, and so the trucks at night have the lights on and stuff like that. And we went into a replacement center there, and when we were going in, it's dark and somebody's taking you to a place where you can flop down in the orchard or whatever, and there's guys already there, and they think you're rookies just coming from the States, but they'd already, we're going through what they had gone through. And they're hollering at you, where were you on D-Day? Where were you when the fight was going on? And guys would get mad, boy, and the guy would say, when he'd say, where were you back in the States? Where were you on D-Day? The guy would say, I'm back in the States with your wife. And we were drinking beer or dancing and stuff like that. And you can't see the guy and he can't see you, but they're cussing one another. GIs are something, man.
It's that boys will be boys thing, right?
Oh, yeah. But Andy, them people over there had been trot on for 4 years and they'd give anything to be liberated. But if they had their choice, they all wanted to be liberated by the Americans. And the American is different. He's just kind of a happy-go guy. Even when the shells are flying, some of them are telling jokes. And he's so good to, like the kids over there, he gives away his candy and stuff like that. And everybody just loved the Americans. Yeah. Yeah, the GI was different. And he had something to say. He had his own pet name for everything. Yeah, Americans are different.
When you got back to, did you go back to the same unit you were with before?
Oh, I was fortunate that I was. Yeah, a lot of guys didn't. I could have very well wound up in the infantry or something like that. But I went back, and what they do there, when you land back in Normandy, then they put you in a replacement center, like they had in North Africa. And maybe you're there 4 or 5 days, maybe. And then they pile you on trucks and take you closer to the front. You're in another one. You stay there for a couple of days, and then you move up till you get up pretty close to the front. So then we got up to Maastricht, was the capital city of the province of Limburg in Holland. But it was near the Dutch or the German border. Maastricht was in a corner of Holland where Holland, Belgium, and Germany come together. So when you get up there to the last replacement center that they're sending you to, your unit will be there, the rear unit of your division. If they're on the line, your supply is back there, or your kitchen's back there, stuff like that. So when I got there, I went to the rear unit of our supply. And the supply sergeant was a guy by the name of Danny Caesar. And I knew Danny because he was my supply sergeant when I was in the company. And we got to be pretty good friends because Danny was from Philadelphia, South Philly. So we got to be pretty good friends. And so when they dump you off there, he's supposed to let the first sergeant up front know that you're back there, and then he sends you up front. And I had never gotten a furlough before I went overseas. And I said, Dan, do me a favor. I said, don't tell Sergeant Pelfrey I'm back here. I said, I want to go in town tonight. I've never had a furlough. So he said, okay. He said, you go into town. And of course, it's a big city, and it's right on a huge river. And it's a big supply dump for the Americans. So the Germans come there and bomb that quite often. So every night, I think even in Sicily, when it gets dark, Jerry is up there flying around. They call him Bed Check Charlie. You ever hear the guys talk about that? And he's just flying around up there and it's just going boo. And that's all he's doing, is flying around, because he knows sooner or later if there's a GI down there, it's going to get on his nerves. And then he's going to fire his gun. He don't know where he is up there. He hears him. And sure enough, some GI can't take it any longer, so he'll fire the gun. See? And then the Jerry sees you firing the gun, he sees the tracer or whatever, so then he'll drop the butterfly bombs. Of course, and then I guess he gets on the radio, and he radios in his position, and then maybe they'll send some bigger stuff out there. So we're going to go into town. I met another guy there from my regiment. His name was Francis Baker. So we're going to go in town, look for a tavern. A lot of bridges on that town. And the Jerry would try to knock those bridges out. So we're going into the town, and between the sidewalk and the street, now there's a lot of civilians living in the town. There's a patch of grass, like the streets in town, and the Dutch had dug holes in there in case it was an air raid. They would go down in the hole. So we're walking into town, and here's jury up there floating around. And I said to the guy I was with, Francis Turner, I said, man, if he drops any bombs, man, I'm going in that hole right there. Well, you know, man, as soon as Jerry dropped that bomb, you could hear it whistling. Man, I head for that hole. Franny's in the hole. He got the jump on me. So I back up, trying to go in the house. So the door was locked, and I'm up there in a little overshoot over the step. I'm like this, man, because you fire that stuff up there, the anti-aircraft, it has to come down. It don't stay up there. And that was coming down all over the street. So then that was over, and we got together, and down the street, we hear music playing, you know, and we see light coming out from under the doorway. And we hear the music, you know, we see the light. It's a tavern. So we're all hipped up, man. We're going in there and get us a couple of beers or something, you know, just chat with the guys. And we go there, and Franny, the place is crowded. You couldn't even get in the place. So then we just gave it up as a bad deal and went on back and slept in a tent back there by the supply sergeant. So the next day, he still hadn't sent me up. It was in the afternoon. That somebody has to come for you. So I walk out of the place and I walk up the road. And there's a tavern there. And barmaids are big time in Holland. So I was by myself, didn't know anybody. I said, well, I'll go in there and see what's going on. So I walk in the tavern. And there's a barmaid there. And there was a guy sitting on a stool at the bar. And I see his shoulder patch. He's wearing the patch of the 2nd Armored Division. So I go over to the bar and I sit down and I said, what unit are you out of? I knew he was out of my division. And he said, I'm out of Hell on Wheels, 2nd Armored. I said, what unit? He said, I'm out of 66. I said, so am I. I said, what company? And he said, D Company, which was a tank company. I said, oh, I'm from Recon. So then I sit down alongside him in the bar, and we're both doing a beer there. Wasn't a Christian yet. And we got to talk, and I said, where are you from? And he said, I said, someplace you never heard of. He said, not far from Philadelphia. I said, tell me where it is. And he said, I'm from Trapp. Trapp's right over here on 113, between mile over here. So we just kind of sat there and chatted, and then I went back to thing there, and then I got shipped back up to the company.
So that's the second time you're on the opposite side of the world.
Yeah.
You find somebody less than 5 minutes from you.
Yeah. Then when I got home, this first guy, Harry Such, whose home was in Pottstown, he'd come down here and visit me once in a while. And he worked at Firestone Tire Company there in Pottstown. Yeah, I went to his funeral a few years ago.
That's incredible that you get to meet these people who are, basically your neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you rejoin your old unit.
Yeah.
And are you assigned to a new tank, or do you get to meet up with the guys you were with before?
No. Well, same guys, but they put me back in an armored car. And the guy that had been gunner in the armored car was my very best friend from over there, Vincent Egan. Vince still lives today up in New Britain, Connecticut. And the commander, that was Sergeant Tom Kane. Tom was a little guy, not very big, and wasn't much to him. He was from the Bronx. And I'd always say to him, he'd be off somewhere, and I'd holler, Sergeant Kane. Just kidding with him, And he'd turn around, what do you want? And I'd say, Fatah Kassin. Didn't mean anything, but he didn't know what I was saying, Then he'd get a little closer. What are you saying? I'd say, Fatah Kassin. He finally got tired of that. He said, boy, you never better know you're putting my crew. He said, I'm going to send you on the worst patrols there are. You remember that, Evans. You better cut that stuff out. When I get up there in Germany, and they put me in his vehicle. and I had just come from the hospital and had new stuff and had it tied on the back of the turret. And we're in this field and Jerry shelling us. Man, I mean, they're really shelling us. We're right inside the German border from Holland. And that shrapnel's flying around. And then Sergeant Kane said, I smell something burning. And then I could smell it. And then he pops up out of the turret. And I wasn't going to look out there. He said, hey, your bag's on fire. They call them musette bags, but we didn't call them musette bags. A piece of that hot shrapnel had lodged in there and was smoldering in that bag. Yeah. And he said, you get out there and get that bag off there before it sets the vehicle on fire. Man, no way did I want to climb out on that deck and cut that thing off, man. First thing I'd do, man, I'd get the knife out and have it ready, and I'd get out there and jump off, kick that thing off there and come back in that turret. And then a couple days after that, he got wounded. And I had to, at night, and I had to take him to the medics. Then I don't think he ever did come back. Yeah, he did come back, I guess, but I wasn't with his crew.
So you
Then now we're in Germany.
when did you? Because you were eventually put back on a tank again.
Yeah.
Correct. And were you still the gunner then, or?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's when you were hit a second time.
Yeah.
So what happened? What happened the second time?
Well, we crossed the Rhine River then. You know, the war is winding down, but you don't think it'll ever be over. You just don't. Excuse me. It's day after day. And there wasn't any solid line of defense with the Germans anymore from the North Sea and Holland to Switzerland. A lot of that was broken up and it was just solid places, you know. And we crossed the Rhine River, and I remember coming down the bank and went to that pontoon bridge, and it was way across there. I think it was either 1,100 feet or 1,700 feet was the length of that bridge. And you come down on that pontoon bridge, and it goes down in the river a little bit, and it's wide, and it's deep, and it's running. And then you're afraid, man, Jerry's going to shell it while you're on the bridge. But we finally got across there, and then they gave us a mission to go on. There was a big canal there called the Dortmund-Ems Canal. It was in that part of Germany where Essen is and Dortmund. It's all built up, a lot of manufacturing. One town after another. Excuse me. And Jerry had blown all the main bridges. Not only the primary, but the secondary, most of the third class bridges. But our job was to go in this area. They thought there was some bridges there that wouldn't hold a tank or a vehicle, but maybe a farmer's bridge where you get some infantry across. Once you get the infantry across, then you can get a little landing place there, and the engineers could put up a new bridge. But there was 3 bridges that they had given us. The first 2 we went to were blown. And then we went to the other area, and I could see down along the canal, that bridge was still intact. But then we started firing. Everybody starts firing in case there's some Germans around that bridge, and when they see us coming, they'll blow it. Well, you kind of think that firing down there will keep them down, you know, and they won't blow it. But then we got almost onto it. Then that thing blew up. And then we called in and told them what had happened, you know, and we didn't have anything else. And so then they told us to come on in, and wherever headquarters was that time was in another little town. And it got to be dark, and once you get into Germany, you know, when you're in France, Belgium, and Holland, you know, they're allies. You treat the country nice and the people nice. But when you cross that border into Germany, it's different then, man. What is German, and what is American is American. What is German is American. You take whatever you just want. And when you first got into Germany, the looks they gave you, you know, they let you know you're not wanted here. You know, and they don't smile or nothing. And you just go into their homes or whatever you see, you know, you just take. And like I say, the GIs, he's after everything. There was pots and pans hanging on tanks and vehicles, and you saw the infantry carrying this and that they'd take out of German homes. When you dig a hole in the ground, You'd go to the German house, man, get yourself a nice blanket to put in there on the dirt and stuff. It was different then, man. And they couldn't believe it, man. You had come 5,000 miles and finally you're in their homeland. And some of them were kind of nice to you. Of course, the German, there's American too, you know, he's always after the ladies. So then they put out the non-fraternization law. Did you ever hear the guys talk about that? And that came out. And so, of course, a lot of the GIs, they wouldn't pay any attention to that. And I don't know what the fine was if you got caught. It was either $35 or $65 that they would take out of your pay, you know, if you got talking to a German civilian. So that's the way it was when you got into Germany. But then anyway, they called us back, and that night we're in this German house. They're in part of the house, and we just go in. And but before that, before we had gotten the Rhine River, we got to the Rhine River when we were called back, and we went into a German house, big house. The house and the barn is under the same roof, and we just take over the bedrooms and the big kitchen. And the Germans, they could have one of the kitchens in the other part of the house, you know, but we would take over, so we'd have a place to sleep, and we would cook in the kitchens. That's what we were doing this night after we had got up there to the canal. And then the order came down, they were hollering, stand to alert. When they hollered, stand to alert, the GI cusses like he never cussed before. This is one of the things out in Hollywood. The guy said, did you cuss? I said, yeah, we cussed. It was the first language most of the time. When they holler stand to alert, it means get all your equipment together, man, we're moving out. And man, we thought we were going to have a nice night. And then the orders come down. They said that now we're going to be pulling out of here and we're going on a mission tonight. We're going behind the enemy lines. And nobody's going to be out there but jury, and it's going to be dark. And with some kind of, they don't tell you what the mission is, but they said time was the essence. And they said if we run into any action till daybreak tomorrow or whenever this mission is done, if you can't get out of it, knock it off, pull out and go. Just let it behind you. Don't spend any time trying to find jury or knocking him out. Just try to get around him and go on with the mission. We did find out later on what the mission was. So then we mounted up. And we had, I guess earlier that afternoon, we went through some of them barns. You're always scrounging around, not only looking for something to eat or something to drink, but maybe some juries that are hiding out. And you run into a lot of alcohol, home brew and stuff. And some of it came in jugs, man, this high. The basket whipped around them. And then you'd get in there and pour it out into something small and then pour it into little things and stack it in every little place in your tank, you know. And that's what we done. We had every empty spot in the tank, man. All the vehicles too, man. Bottles of schnapps. So we pull out and it's dark. And no action yet. And I'm sitting in the gunner seat. We had lost a guy the day before, so I didn't have a loader. But the tank commander who was sitting down front came up and sat in the gunner seat alongside of me. So we're going along. It must have been about 11 o'clock at night, I guess. And here come a German freight train coming down on the right side of the road, coming out of Germany. He didn't know how far the Americans were up there. We didn't know that they were coming either. But that train was coming down there, and everybody just swung their guns around there and shot that thing up. You know, and somebody must have put a big shell in the boiler, and it blew up. And you could hear jury screaming and hollering. But we didn't go near there, and you know, there's big fires down there, and then the orders came to move on. So we went on, and we stopped at 5:30 in the morning. And we got out of the tanks, everybody just piles out. And just threw all caution to the wind. It's just unbelievable. There wasn't any action during the night, and we just didn't think there was going to be any. So we stopped to take a 15-minute break give the vehicle a break and the men to take a break. So I pile out of the vehicle, and gunners hang out with gunners, and drivers with gunners or drivers and so forth. That's how you buddy up and carry on, get along. So coming up alongside of my tank was this guy from New Britain, Connecticut, Vince. And we were smoking there, and and it just started to get daylight, barely daylight. You're very careful if you smoke at night. You're smoking like this, covering the cigarette, But I don't think that wasn't really dark yet, but we weren't paying any attention to it. And so then you have little stoves in a vehicle about that high, and gasoline, you pump them up and put your canteen cup on there with the water in it and make your coffee. So that's what we done. We said, well, let's go back here and see Jim Cherry. So we're walking down the road. All our vehicles are lined up, and everybody's out on the road. It's a very narrow blacktop road, and we get near Jim Cherry. They had a big Sherman tank with 105 on it, artillery piece. They got the Shermans when we got the light tanks, before they had a light tank. So I see Jim up on the turret, and he's grabbing the 50 and he swings that around, and he starts firing. And here comes a German truck up the side of the road. Maybe he was in our column all night after dark. Nobody paid him mind. I don't know. And maybe he stayed in the column. I don't know. But when he saw that, the truck swerved over and turned over on his side. Well, then all the GIs they're over there rooting through the truck to see what they can find. The driver is dead, but they pull the assistant driver out. So then the trash is all over the road there. I mean, just crazy. And so then the order come to mount up. We had to go on. So I'm standing up in the turret of the tank. My loader, who was a tank commander, he said, well, you got some sleep during the night. Now I'll take a nap. Down in front in the light tanks, there's 2 seats, a driver and assistant driver. They're like little stuffed chairs. Not very big, but they're comfortable. And you could sleep in those. So he went down and got in there. And I said, I don't think we'll need the way things are going. John won't need you. So then a Jeep calls up alongside of our tank. And it was out of the scout section. In the scout section, your platoon is broken up into the armored car section with the tank and the artillery section and the scout section. They have Jeeps. So there's a guy, when Jeep stopped, there's a guy sitting there in the assistant driver's seat. His name is Shorty Mercer. Shorty was the kind of guy, he'd been in the Army 1,000 years. He'd never learned how to soldier. But everybody loved him. He was a little rotund guy. His cigarette was always hanging down in his mouth, and always smoking. And his hat was always down over his face, bumping on his nose. He was like that wherever you'd see him. And he would be always singing, he was from the South, and he was always singing Big Bouquet of Roses or Walking the Floor Over You, something like that, Hillbilly guy. And he said, hey, you need a loader up there, don't you? I said, nah, I'm all right, Shorty. He said, oh, let me up there. I said, what do you want up here for? And I said, it's cold up here like it is in the Jeep. He said, yeah, but I'll be out of the wind. I said, well, come on up there. So he gets up and he gets in the loader seat, which is to my right. I'm sitting on the left. And we go through the thing about loading the gun. He didn't have to do anything really. When I would fire the big gun, I'd just pull the handle, the breech would pop open, the empty would come out, and all he'd have to do is throw the other one in. And I'd go like that, So he got up and he got in there, and we talked a little bit. And then we're still sitting on the street, on the road, and here comes a platoon leader from the head of the column. And I see him coming. I didn't even know what he wanted, and I knew that he didn't want me. So he gets alongside of our tank, and he looks up and he said, where's Sergeant Selby? I said, down front. I said, he wants to take a break. And he said, well, that's okay, Evans. He said, now we're just going down here. There's little bridges down here. We want to see if they're going to be heavy enough or strong enough to hold the tanks. He said, and now he said, and I said, he said, then, he said, you know, everybody gets a chance to go first. He said, now it's your turn to go first. Well, nobody wants to go first. Nobody. And I said, yes, sir. He said, have your driver get out and go to the head of the column. So I hollered down to the driver, was Harold Asher, was from Kansas City, Michigan. I said, did you get the good news? Then he starts swearing. I said, do what he says, pull out and go to the head of the column. We pulled out and went to the head of the column, then we started out. We hadn't gone, Andy, 50 feet, I guess, and I saw a big red flash on the right side of the road. It just big ball of fire lit up. I dropped down in my seat, and you do like you always do. You lean forward to look into the sights. Your left hand goes to your switches. You grab the turret switch, it's like a pistol grip. If you turn it left and right, that's the way the turret will go. But the more you turn it left and right, the faster it'll turn. Plus, for your two guns in your turret, you have the triggers on top of that. In other words, you can grab that thing, you have two triggers that press down with the thumb. So just about I'd leaned forward, that thing had hit that turret. Lit up the inside of that turret. Man, that turret got cherry red. And right away, our guys started firing on the Germans. There's a lot of firing going on. The Germans are firing back. And then within a couple of minutes, our guys done what we were told to do to break it off. So they broke off the fire and went on. So Asher, the driver, had bailed out, so I bailed out. And I knew I was hurt, but I didn't know that I couldn't see. But I knew, I'm pretty sure that where that shell had hit, it had killed Shorty. I jump out on the sponson and jump as far as I could to get away from the tank. The tank's burning. And down in the ditch. And Asher is in the ditch. And now the ammo is starting to go off in the tank. And the Germans aren't even coming to us. I hear the Germans talking. And I'm laying there in the ditch, and I really thought I was going to die. And it just felt like this side of my face was gone. So I was reaching in my jacket pocket like this. What was I going in there for? I was going in there to take something out. No, that was a little bit later. But I thought I was going to die. And I really wanted to die. I thought if I looked that bad the way I thought I felt, I didn't want to go back home. And then I thought, we're behind the lines, and our guys are gone. Nobody will find our bodies. My family will never know what happened to me. So then we're laying in the ditch, and the Germans still haven't come for us, but everything's quiet, except the fire's burning in the tank. And I knew we were going to be taken prisoner. So I going with my hands in my jacket pockets here, pulling out some medals that I had taken off a jury the day before. I knew if they caught me with that stuff, it would be bad news. But before that, I had been wearing a German P38 pistol. And when we got the orders that night, I took that pistol off. By the way, my weapon was a Thompson sub. But I would carry this German P38 in my pocket when I'm behind the German lines when there wasn't any shooting going on, but I didn't want to be carrying with the Tommy gun. But you're in Germany, you want to have some kind of weapon, so I would wear that on my belt. But the night before that, when they said we're going behind the German lines, I took that off. And I laid it on the ammo rack behind me. So I was glad that I didn't have that on there. The way my fingers were, I'd have never been able to get it off. So then the Germans are still talking, but nobody's coming for us. And so I said to Asher, how do I look? I wasn't hurting, not much. And he didn't say anything. I said, how do I look? And he said, you look awful, or something to that effect. The first time he wouldn't answer, then I asked him again. So then I said, well, go in my first aid kit and take you had a first aid kit on your belt. It had a little packet of sulfur powder in there. And besides a couple other things, I said, well, get that sulfur powder and sprinkle on my face. So he done that, and then we laid there, and then I didn't want to die. I just had a desire, man, for some reason I wanted to live. But I just couldn't figure out, why aren't the juries coming for us? Our guys are going. So then I said to Asher, we ought to try to get out of here. And he said, no, we can't get out. And about that time, he says, here comes a German officer. So all drivers carry 45s and shoulder holsters. So, of course, when he bailed out, he had his 45. So he says, here comes that German officer. And when the German officer is coming, then I hear him challenge him to put up his hands. Handy Hock is the word. You don't pronounce it like that, I guess. That's not the German pronunciation. But the jury knows what you're saying. And as soon as he says Handy Hock, I guess the jury went for his gun or something. Harold Asher shoots him and kills him. And still they don't come for us. And now I know we're dead. He shot that German officer. I know there's no way out, man. We're going to die right here. But we laid there a few minutes, and still no jury. Tank's burning. And I said to Asher, we got to get out of here. The tank's going to blow up. I said, I'm going to stand up. And I said, if I knew it was a blacktop road, I said, I'll take one step at a time. With my hands in the air, maybe they won't shoot me. So he said, well, I'll go with you. So then we both get up and he gets a hold of me. And we just took a couple of steps. And then when he ran into some Germans, and then they took us to another guy that was a German officer. It was a different story then. He spoke good English, but man, was he stinking rotten mad, boy.
So yeah. Were you taken prisoner?
Yeah. But see, I can't see, and I'm like this. Now I'm really starting to hurt. And I'm sure Asher had his hands up too. And they take us to this German officer. Asher's telling me that he's an officer. And this German officer shouts and hollers at Asher, really screams at him. You shot and killed a German officer. And Asher says, I did not. And this guy is really mad. If the shoe's on the other foot, we're supposed to be getting shot by this time. That's what you do. Good thing I didn't even carry a pistol. And he said, we saw you. And then I just knew then they were getting ready to kill us. And then finally he says, you can put your hands down. I guess that's war. And I dropped my hands. I wasn't a Christian at that time, but I knew about God. And these are two words I said, thank you, Lord. So they took us and they loaded us in I don't know if you ever seen pictures of the Kubelwagens, the German wagon. So they loaded us in that, in the back seat. And I believe this was one of them that had the roof on it, I thought. They loaded us in the back. But on the floor was the body of that German officer that Asher killed. So they loaded us in that truck, and we drove a little bit, and then the car stopped. German civilians gathered around the car. And then they're talking. And then I could hear one German speaking like, Zwei Panzer. Second Armored, he saw my patch, And then there's airplanes, daylight now, airplanes are flying around up there. And I just knew that they were looking for something down there that's moving, where they come down and strafe it. Then I said to Asher, that's our next thing here. We're going to get killed by our own planes. So then we move on. And then we're slowing down again. And Asher says, it looks like it's a military something or other. So we're ordered to get out of the car. So we get out of the car. And then we go in a little building. It is some kind of a military thing, Asher's telling me. So I'm sitting over there. Asher's sitting over here. Then there comes a German in there. And he's talking. Of course, I don't talk because I can't see what's going on. So then he says something to Asher in English. So then he said something about, I have to go, I'll be right back. So I'm sitting over there on the bench, really hurting now, man. Well, just can't hardly hack it. I said, Asher, when he comes back, ask him if he'll give me some morphine. So when he comes back, Asher approached him or said to him, he's really hurting, he's having some pain, a lot of pain. Do you have any morphine? This guy is arrogant and loudmouth too, boy. A very good English man. This is what he screamed out. He said, you Americans are supposed to have everything. Where's your morphine? Till the war was over, until this day, when they write about losing the war, they tell us about the materiel of the Americans. Yeah. And he said, you Americans are supposed to have everything. So he goes and he comes back with the morphine, and he shoots me in the arm here. Then I laid out back on the bench. I started feeling pretty good. Then I went to sleep. When I wake up, I'm on a litter. Asher's gone. I don't know where I am. I don't even know what time it is. I'm being carried up a flight of stairs on a litter. 2 guys. And they set the litter down on the floor. And then I hear some girls talking. And I don't know why I thought this, but I thought they were probably nurses. They sound like they might have been 19 or 20 years old. And you're writing down, you want me to hold up?
No.
Oh, okay.
Keep going.
So they're talking between the 2 of them, the 4 of them. So then they lift me up off the litter and stand me up. They take the litter and I hear them going down the stairs. And the girls are talking in German. I don't know what they're talking about, but they take all my clothes off and put me in a tub and gave me a bath. Would you believe that? And then put a nightgown on me. Man, I hadn't been in a nightgown, man, since I was a kid. And then they put me in bed. And all the time they're talking, and what is sad about it, man, the only language being spoken is that of the enemy. And they put me in that bed, and I just didn't know what to do. I had no idea where I was, and I laid in that bed. But, you get the feel of things. Everybody does, not in a situation like that. I know over there on my right, that's where I came up. And over here, I know it's a nurse's station because I hear some activity. And over there's some Germans talking, men. And then I didn't know for sure, I didn't give it much thought, but it turned out that they were 5 wounded Germans. But they put me in that bed, and night started coming. And I thought, man, then another German comes in, speaks good English. That's what happened. And he sits over here by the nurse's station. He tells me who he is. He said, I'm a medic. He said, you're in an aid station. We don't have anything here. We can't help you. Medically, we don't have anything. We don't have much to eat. The girls will do their best to take care of you. Then he says that he didn't grill me anything about my unit or anything like that. Then he said that he had been a medic. He was a medic, and he had been in the Battle of the Bulge. And he's speaking pretty good English. And he said, down in the Bulge, he said, I was in an ambulance, a bus with a lot of medics, and they were taking us somewhere. And we thought we were going to be strafed, even with the Red Cross on the bus. He said, we all got out and started scattering. And he said, your fighter planes came down. He said there were so many American fighter planes, they were strafed from one German soldier. And you don't generally do that. You just strafe a batch of them, Then he started talking and asked me questions about the Russians. Because they knew, when the Germans went into Russia, they said that the Russians were subhuman. You know how they hung them and all that kind of stuff. And then they knew now the Germans were already in their land, and they were concerned with what the Russians were going to do to them. So then he left, and then they fed me something. I don't know what it was. It wasn't bad. And I was totally exhausted, Andy, from the day. And then I thought about them Germans over there. I thought, man, what's going to happen tonight when the lights are out? Some of them guys might get out of bed, man, and come over here and kill me, blaming me for their wounds. But it never happened. I guess finally maybe I did fall asleep a little bit. Then daylight came. It was Easter Sunday, 1945. Then the nurses were in there and come over to the bed and do this and that around the bed, and speaking to me. And then the German would come in and he'd sit there and, I'd eat and he'd talk. And that went on for, I guess, 6 or 7 more days. Then the German comes in one morning and I was starting to hurt, man. Oh, and my face was just a mess. Infection set in, man. I couldn't live with myself. But they would come in and put wet patches or something on me, So then he came in one morning all excited, and he said, your comrades are coming. Your comrades are coming. And, man, I sat up on the bed, man. I started crying. Andy, man, finally going to see and hear some Americans. And he said, the civilians saw a scout car outside of town. I said, man, a scout car is for reconnaissance. Maybe it's my guys. Man, they kind of got me ready to get rid of me, to send me out. Man, I was there all day, man. Every moment, every minute passed by, man, they didn't come. Man, night came, and still they didn't come. Man, I was just disgusted. I wasn't disgusted. I started to cry. I thought, man, maybe there's nothing to it. I said, man, maybe we're going to die here. So I went to sleep, and next morning it was a 50 caliber machine gun going off. I knew it was 50. And I could hear Americans talking on the street, down below on the street. Then my concern was that they don't shoot through the window up there. And I'm in there. Then they came running in the building. I guess it was 4 or 5 of them. I hear them running up the stairs. And I guess the Germans told them I was in there, Then they wanted to know my name and serial number and my unit and did I need anything and how did they treat me and all this and that. Then it wasn't long after that, then the ambulance came by and loaded me up, took me out of there. Then I went back to, I think, Paris to a hospital, and I stayed there 2 or 3 days, then I flew me to England. But it was quite an experience.
I'd say.
Yeah.
And then you were able how long were you in Europe until you were able to come home?
That was that was the 31st of March, day before when I got hit. And I was in, I remember when the news came over. When the news came over, I guess that Roosevelt died. I don't know where I was then. But when the war ended, I was in a hospital in England. I don't know how long I might have been in a hospital in Paris.
Do you remember finally coming home?
Oh, yeah.
What was that like? What was the first thing you did when you finally got back here?
Yeah, well, I had a few operations over there in the hospital. And the thing about that was, when they took me to England that time, and I can remember it was in the evening, and I was on a litter, and they set the litter on the floor, and I was in this hospital, and the guy came up to me, and there was GIs all around there, and they were eating and talking, laughing and going on, and I couldn't see, and I wasn't too happy. I didn't know if I'd ever see, I was 20, 21 years old, and I wasn't too happy. So the guy came up to me, he said, Evans? I said, yeah. He said, I see by everything they done to you, they wrote on a paper and tugged you on your PJs, once you got into an American hospital. Everything that they gave, your treatment, they kept track of it. He said, I see you're from the 2nd Armored Division. I said, yeah. He said, do you know where you are? And I said, no. He said, you are now in Tidworth where you were before you left to go to Normandy. He said, you're not in the camp, but you're in a hospital in town. He said, and when you were here, before you went to Normandy, you had a lot of guys being wounded in the training. He said, and they were sent here for treatment. You became our pet division. And when they'd get the news on the radio, in the communiques, when they were allowed to mention unit names. He said, we followed you across Europe. He said, you became our favorite division. His name was Rosen, Sergeant Rosen. I remember him. He said, so I want you to know, as long as you're in this hospital, anything you want, Evans, you, I'll see that you get it. But I still wasn't too happy. And I see all these guys around there laughing and carrying on. I said, man, what are these guys so happy about? And I can't see. And then he says, now somebody will take you over here and will put you in your bed. So they went over there and set the litter down. I got up and they helped me to the bed and I sat on the cot. And the guy said, now we're going to bring you something to eat. So then the guy comes with the tray. And he said that he told me what was on the tray. He said, now I'll feed you. And being I wasn't in a good mood, and Andy, I didn't want no GI sticking a spoon in my mouth. I didn't want no GI feeding me. If it was one of them nurses around there, fine business. And I told the guy, you ain't feeding me. That's my job. I said, no GI is putting or a dog face, I called him. I said, no dog face is going to put the spoon in my mouth. He said, oh, come on. He said, if I don't feed you, I'm going to get in trouble. He said, why don't you just let me feed you now? He said, and tomorrow when your breakfast comes, I'll see that there's a little note on your tray that comes to you that you'll feed yourself. So that's what happened there. Then I still couldn't see. I was there a couple of weeks before I really was able to see. But I knew that I was in my cot I was bed number 7, and then they went down this way, and I'd go on. I'd count my cot 1, then take a couple steps was 2, till I got down to the end of the ward. Then it was the end of the ward. There was the wall there. That was cot number 7. So when I got down there, then the guy would tell me the first time around, I'd put my hands up and feel across that wall, and then there was double doors there. I'd go through there, and I still remember that. And over here is another wall. I go along there, touch that wall. The first closet was PJs, small, medium, and large, as the shelves, you know. And the next one was the towels and the pillowcases and the blankets. And the next one was I guess the next one was the towels. Well, anyway, one of them was the PJs, and then the next one was the towels and the blankets, and the other one was your washcloths and stuff like that. Then the next door was the shower. So I was there 2 or 3 weeks doing that. Yeah, so I didn't mind it a bit. The guys would play cards in there at night. Those guys could see, and they would always short sheeting you. You know what short sheeting is, don't you? Yeah, and they used to like to short sheet the guy that couldn't see. So he'd be up out of his cot going somewhere, and while he was going there, they'd do something to his bed, you know, and he couldn't tell where they were messing with at night. So they got in there and pulled that sheet back and put his feet in there, and it would be toothpaste or shaving cream down in there, you know, stuff like that. Yeah, that was a pretty good time there. And then, of course, there was the good chow all the time, all you wanted to eat. And then they would have Coke at night. You know, they'd bring up from the mess hall a big bucket of Coke and dole out to the guys. And of course, then in between that, you'd go to the clinic. They'd send a wheelchair for you. Even if you could walk, they'd take you down, operate on you. Yeah.
So what actually was your injury? What happened in the tank that took your sight?
What happened to the tank?
Were you hit with something that caused you to lose vision?
Yeah, I was hit with a thing, and I just know that it was. If you see any movies on the war in Germany when it was winding down, you see all these old guys and these kids carrying Panzerfaust. You ever see them carrying them on their shoulder? And I'm sure that's what we got hit with. Yeah.
Do you think the blast or the explosion was what caused you to lose your vision?
Oh yeah, and then that molten steel that comes in there, you know. Oh yeah.
Did you have any other injuries besides loss of blindness?
Only my hands. You know, my hands were burnt pretty bad, and my face. But he took the blow. Shorty took the blow. Yeah. But I was out to the Eisenhower farm a number of years ago, my youngest son and I, and they had some vendors set up out there for World War II guys, the displays. and the guy out there had a number of these Panzerfaust. And when we got up to there where this guy was, I kind of stood in the back because he was talking to somebody. The guy, the vendor, he wasn't selling them, just showing them off. And they were talking about them Panzerfaust. And this guy that he was talking to happened to be a medic in the war. And he told about the guys that were in vehicles got hit with those things, what they done to the body. He said they hated to go into a vehicle. You literally had to scrape the body out. Now, after we got knocked out, this I found out after the war. This good friend of mine was in another vehicle. When I came back from the States, we stayed in touch. And then he told me that after the mission was completed that day, they were in an area where they could go back and to where the tank was knocked out. And he told me that he climbed up and looked into the tank. And I said, what was it like? He said, I'm not going to tell you. He said, you don't want to know what it looked like in there anyway. So I guess it's really done a job on Shreddy Mercer. Yeah.
How did you deal with, losing guys during the war?
Well, I don't know. Not too bad, I guess. If they're very close to you, you always look forward to them coming back. Or I don't think you really, you hate to see a guy get killed, especially if you're close to him. But you also understand, that that's war. It could happen to you or stuff like that.
Do you ever think, it's just a matter of time till your number is called, essentially?
Yeah.
What was the, I guess, out of all the time you spent overseas, what was the scariest moment you had?
The scariest moment? Yeah, I'd have to say maybe that time down in that hedgerow there. That was the worst day of my life. I think for all the time I spent over there, Normandy, the Bulge, and Normandy, the Bulge. What else? Yeah, Normandy, the Bulge was another part. Oh, I guess the time that we spent up in the Siegfried Line. We were 3 months up in there. They were the 3 worst times of the war.
What was it like being? What's it like being in combat? What goes through your mind when you're fighting?
Well, I think that's one of the things that is good about being a gunner. You're busy. Yeah. A lot of times, if you're just sitting there, like if you're being shelled or being strafed, there's nothing you can do about that. You just sit there, you're hunched up like this, man, you're praying and holding your breath. But, if somebody's firing on you personally and it's where you can use your guns, then it's a little different. I mean, I think a lot of times you don't even realize you're shooting them. You're just part of it.
And how did you deal with, the task of having to kill the enemy? Is it something you just did?
No, I don't think so. Did you see Fury?
Not yet.
Well, when I got it and I read the script, and then in there, I guess it does, I don't remember now, but I know it is in there somewhere. I guess maybe when the movie first starts, I don't know if the scoop of it is one of the guys is pinned into the tank and the tank's on fire, and they kill him rather than let him burn to death. So, but we never had to do that. We never had to kill a guy like that. That had never happened to us. And a lot of things might have happened in Fury that didn't happen to us. You don't see everything that happens, and it don't happen to everybody. So I was not the only guy to get the script. I was only one of the 4 guys to be interviewed by New York Times. And so the guy said to me, this interviewer, he was in California, he called me here. Sony Pictures called me and asked me if I'd be willing to be interviewed by New York Times from L.A.? And I said, yeah, I'd do that. So then he said to me, now let me get this right first. Oh, he said to me about killing one of your own guys. And I said, well, I don't know if it happened. But I said, it never happened in our tank. We never had to kill a guy. And then not long after that, the interview was over, I get the call from Sony Pictures in Hollywood, a guy by the name of Owen Thornton. He said, I see you done the interview. So it went in, and I had the Times here. They put it in the paper there about that I said that Mr. Evans said that they never had to kill a buddy. And then it said something else about, and what is ironical about this, Mr. Evans has already read the skit. He knows what was going on. And then he said something else about killing a buddy. I forget what that was now. But then when Owen Thornton out there, Sony, had read the article, and he said, by the way, he said, we took that scene out about killing that buddy. Now, I don't know if they took that out because I said that we didn't have to do it, but they did take a lot of scenes out. There was a lot of gruesome stuff in there. And a lot of the buildup on Fury was how gruesome it was with the guys and stuff. And maybe they thought they were overdoing it. Now, maybe that's why they took that out. Maybe it's because I said about the thing.
I mean, in your experiences in war, is war that brutal? I mean, did you?
Oh yeah, yeah. Most of the time it is. A lot of times you're out there and you just get shot or something, and you don't, you're not tore up, but sure, it's brutal. I think, Andy, it's harder on your mind than anything. It's just kind of laying out there and you can't do anything, and the way the shells whistle and whine coming in, And then when you're in it for a while, you get kind of tuned to know when to get down. And we had the newspaper every day, the Stars and Stripes, and then Yank magazine every week. And there was always articles in there. And, the GI, don't matter how things are bad, things are going, he's making fun of stuff a lot of times, And then they'd talk about a guy there listening to shells coming in, and one shell will be whistling, listen to this one, it'll kill you. Like, listen to this joke, it'll kill you. And then some shells will be whistling, nearer my God to thee, and all that kind of stuff. And then the greatest gun in all the world over there was the German 88. So if they sent you back to the hospital for shell shock, they would give you a big blue pill, to put you to sleep. You sleep for 2 or 3 days, calm you down. And the pill was blue. The GIs called that the blue 88, because the blue 88, the 88 would knock you out. And then they had a thing in there called, a little poem called Dance and Dine on the Banks of the Rhine. What was it? Dance and Dine on the Banks of the Rhine. Something about the 88s, and it said the mortar the merrier, and it was really funny. And it was played by some German and his 88-piece band. Gee, it's a crazy, man. But that's what makes it, you get by with it,
Just those little distractions.
Yeah. And you got into Germany, you killed the rabbits and your chickens and all that kind of stuff. And I can remember the time we first got into Germany, we were in that Siegfried line for 3 weeks, man. We killed a hog and took it in the basement of a barn there. And you couldn't shave it like you do when you're skinning a hog. You skinned it, just cut the skin off, And I remember we saved the shoulders, the hams, and the pork chops. Then we just kind of cook them, boil them, It was better than what you were getting. It was different. And then when you got into Germany, that was all farm country. And in those little villages, all those cellars were stocked, man, with jars and cans fruits and vegetables and apples and potatoes. And so we were dug in for 3 weeks. You'd make a dash for that row of houses and in there, and you always knew the cellar door was in the back. When you got in there, down that cellar, man, you'd load up with jars and stuff. Yeah, and then you'd tiptoe out over the rubble. Of course, Jerry watches you over there too, till you get out the front door, then you run, man, to get into your hole. One of the best stuff they had that I loved was sausages in the jars. Because I remember when I lived on a farm growing up, and we'd make sausage, and you'd stuff that in a jar, maybe a 2-quart jar, and pour the hot lard in there, and that would seal it, Yeah, they had good sausages. Yeah. And then you always had the good blankets and stuff, man, to line your foxholes.
Did you, when you got home after the war, after everything had come to an end, did you have any issues?
About the war?
Yeah.
No. Never kept me awake or nothing. And when I came home, I never give it a thought that, that the government owed me anything. I never knew anything that there was a VA or, I just thought that they brought you home alive and discharged you alive. That was it. Yeah. But I said when I get home, man, I'm not going to work for a long time. I came home, and in the Farmers and Mechanics National Bank in Phoenixville, India, I had $988. I knew I should never have to work again. Yeah. Boy, I'll be a lifetime spending that. It's almost $1,000. And then I got discharged, and I had a car before I went into service, and they had quit making cars during the war, So I didn't sell mine, and several times while I was over there, my mother had died before I went into service. My dad says, I could get you a lot of money for your car if you want to sell it. And I said, no, just kind of keep the car. I can't use it over here. And if I die, I got no use for a car back states. So then when I was coming home, he got the car. I put it in storage in Phoenixville for $3 a month. They would keep your car, they would jack it up and would be in a garage. But the only problem was before you went into service, you were out of tires anyway. So I knew when I come back I had to get tires. But I came back and while I was still in the service, I couldn't get tires. But they were worn out, but you would do what you'd done. When the tire would blow out, you'd get out and jack the car up and take the wheel off and take the tire off and the tube out and patch that and put it back together and go on. So then I got discharged down, by the way, down Atlantic City, one of the big hotels. And the day I got discharged, I got my last month's pay. Then they give you muster and out pay, enough traveling pay from Atlantic City to wherever you lived. Well, I lived in Valley Forge, so I got $2 and some cents, which was the transportation money from Atlantic City to Valley Forge. So, and up till the last 3 years, Uncle Sam supplies everything. If you're going to sleep at night, he has a bed for you, the hole in the ground, or you're going to eat or clothes. And I got down there and got that money out, and I went out of the hotel. And I said, man, I ain't going to walk to that train station. I'm going to ride out of this man's army. I'll call a cab. But then it dawned on me, man, tonight, man, I'm going to have to pay for my food and all this and that. Yeah, but then I got home, and then I came home. I was in Atlantic City down there. I just got down there a couple of months. They finished your treatments, and then I got discharged. And then I came home, and I got the car out. I'd get the car out for me. This was in August, I guess, or September. And I was going with a girl I eventually married. She was working over in Ardmore. You know where Ardmore is down there? So the day that Truman was to come on the air to make the official announcement of the war being officially over, I was going to see her, and I was going down toward Norristown in Jeffersonville with my Chevy to go pick her up over there in Ardmore. And everybody, he's making that announcement on the radio, and everybody's out in the street clapping and dancing and hollering, making all kind of noise. Man, my tire blew out on the right back. You know, some guys came around there and helped me fix it. I got it together, but then I got discharged. But before I get discharged, the guy said to me, "What are you going to do when you get out, Don?" I said, "I ain't working, Shorty. No working, man." He said, "Well, I don't blame you. But if you ever need a job," he said, "I got a job for you." And I said, "Okay, but you might as well forget about it because I'm not going to work till I'm broke." And then they had a thing, Andy, called you could sign up and get $20 a week for 52 weeks. The GI called it the 5220 Club. So I said, "Man, we'll sign up and be a member of the 5220 Club. 20 bucks, buy me gas for the week, you know." So I go to sign up, and the guy gives me the papers. He said, "Now, what did he say? Oh, he said, now you have to realize that if a job comes up that you can do, you have to take this job or you don't get $20. I said, "What?" I hit the roof, man. I said, "I've been in the Army for 3 years. So I'm not going to go to work." "Oh, young man," he said, "I'm sorry. We can't give you the okay to get the 20 bucks. So I was disappointed in that one. So then now I'm out of the service, and I'm able to get tires for the car, but they're still ration. But you have to get the ration papers. So I go to the ration board, and I tell the guy, "What can I do for you, young man?" All the old guys got the job, you know, because the young guys were away. I said, "Oh, I want to get tires for my car." "Oh," he said, "that's no problem, young man. We'll see that you get the tires of the car." I said, "Okay." He gives me some papers. He said, "Now you take these home." He said, "You have your employer sign them and bring them back, and you can get 2 new tires." I said, "My employer?" He said, "Yeah, the man you're working for." I said, "I ain't working." Boy, I really got hit. Boy, I was really mad. I was going to go to President Truman about that. So I had to go see the guy that promised me the job. I said, "Shorty, I guess I'll have to go to work." I said, "I have the papers here. You have to sign them." He said, "Come on in the office. I'll have the superintendent sign the papers that you can get the tires." The superintendent said, "When you get them tires, you better report to work too. You got them tires, or I'm going to tell the ration board about you." I was got out discharged on a Wednesday and went to work on a Wednesday. 6 days I was out working, paying taxes.
When you came back, did you talk a lot about what you did?
Not a whole lot. No, I don't think a lot of the guys didn't talk much about it.
When did you start, when did you start sharing with people what you did?
Well, I guess a number of years. It hasn't been a whole lot of years since guys have been being interviewed and stuff like that, you know. Yeah, sometimes you wouldn't, stuff like that. But they don't talk about the war like they do now. Yet, you know, the war's been over for 70 years, and they're still talking about World War II. And yet, when I went into the service, we were scarcely 20 years removed from World War I. We didn't think about World War I. Man, it would be like the Peloponnesian Wars it'd be to me today. Wars between the Greeks and the Athens. But then, you know, there got to be plenty of jobs. Of course, I went to work. I was getting 60 cents an hour when I went in. So after 3 years away, when I went to work, I got 80 cents an hour. So life was good.
When you're out today, do you tell people you're a veteran? Do people know? Like, do you keep that a secret, or do you share that with people?
Well, I don't. It depends on where you are, you know. And we wear these little caps with your logos on the on the cap, you know. And they want to know your WW2, and then they want to know what outfit you was in. My grandfather was in that. You know, you can talk and stuff like that. But I've been of late. A lot of people have contacted me. You know, like for 4 weeks now, I taught in one of the classes of the young people at church for an hour each Sunday morning for 4 weeks.
When people say thank you for serving, how do you respond?
This is what I tell everybody. There were 16 million of us in there. That's what my answer always is. Yeah. But you know, the Army had everything for you, the military. Anything you wanted, Uncle Sam had it, man. It's unbelievable the stuff that they shipped over there, and the candies and stuff that you didn't need, and all that stuff had to go across the submarine infested ocean, and you don't know how much might have got sunk. Same way with vehicles and letters and of course all the mail, was censored at the time. And the guy that censored your letter, you knew him. He was an officer in the company. So when you were writing to a chick, you were a little loose about what you wanted to say because you knew somebody that knows you was reading your letter. So you cut down on the sugar sometimes that you were putting in there. Yeah, but it's all different now. I don't think there's any, you fly to the war zone and you come back and you email from the war zone, and of course it's a lot different. But I guess if ever was a good war, that was probably a good war, because Andy, America was in the war. Today, who's in the war? The families of the guys that are in the war. Nobody. We don't care if they're in the war. We don't care what they're going through. Man, we're here going our good old ways, doing our good old things, and don't really care about the war over there. But it was different then. You'd go down the street and there'd be a little thing hanging in the window with a blue star or 3 or 4 blue stars, or sometimes the gold stars where somebody had somebody killed, and and there was a rationing going on and all that stuff. Yeah. But I was glad I went, and I was glad my country didn't have to drag me in. I wrote my memoirs from World War II. It's called The Odyssey of an Iron Knight. So when you go here from here today, you'll have an autographed copy.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's just my personal thing, not about the big picture, just where I was and, what I'd done. And I'll probably I would like to write another one called, and I started writing it, but my eyes are too bad anymore. I'd write another one called Après la Guerre or something like that, after the war or something like that, but I probably won't. Do you go to the thing up at Reading?
The air show? The air show?
Yeah.
I went. My first year was last year.
Oh, was it?
And it was awesome.
Yeah, my son and I go every year. For a lot of years we've been going.
They're gonna have a B-29 there this year.
Oh, are they?
It's coming back this year.
Oh, before they used to have the B-17s or something like that.
They're having B-29 is gonna be there, and then they're having an airborne reenactment.
Oh.
So guys go up in a C-47 and actually do an airdrop. So that'll be kind of cool.
Uh-huh.
But I have 2 more questions. So when talking about war and talking about soldiers and veterans, the word hero comes up. What's your definition of a hero?
Of a cure? Oh, I don't think there's a cure.
A hero.
Oh, I really don't know. I don't feel like that I was a hero, by no means. And when you get down to it, sure, there's guys more braver than others, and there are guys that done stuff that they probably wouldn't have had to do, And then who is to say that this guy deserves the Congressional Medal of Honor and the other guy didn't deserve it? But that's life, and that's just the way life is. And I always look forward to Congressional Medal of Honor winner. Now, well, in 1980, at Freedom's Foundation in Valley Forge, you know where Freedom's Foundation is? We built a monument there called All Our Battles. I was in on the making of that. And it's made up in a patio of stones from our battlefields in North Africa, Sicily, and wherever we were. I went over to Europe after the war and got a lot of those. And then the altar is like a big altar stone, and if you ever have some time, sometimes just kind of go down there and look,
Absolutely.
And a lot of people go around that. But I don't know what to say about a hero. Yeah. Like I say, to be sure, there are guys that are a lot braver than that, I mean, you read the story of, Audie Murphy, and yeah, he died a young man. His wife died young too, didn't she? He married that actress. Wanda Hendricks. Yeah.
My final question for you is, out front you have a flag flying. What does that flag represent to you?
This flag that I have flying out there?
The American flag. What does that represent to you?
Well, I guess just because it's my country. I think you kind of get a little more patriotic. If you've been in the service, and doesn't mean that if you weren't in the service that you weren't patriotic. But a lot of people think that if you're veterans, you should be flying a flag.
Okay.
Yeah, I should have a light on it. That's I did have a light on it for a long time. You're not supposed to fly a flag like that without a light. It's a stationary pole. You can have them in the cemetery and stuff like that, without a light on. They're not stationary. Yeah. But for the longest while, I did have But I changed that flag every Memorial Day and every Veterans Day.
Is there anything that we didn't touch upon that you wanted to bring up?
We had that thing. Did you ever hear him talk about Axel Sally?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've kind of followed up on her a lot after the war. I used to listen to her a lot during the war in North Africa when we were in North Africa, and listen to her program from England called Invasion Calling, and of course when the war was old, and when she'd be on that radio, and then she used to sing that. She didn't sing the song, but you'll see it in my book. She would play that song, Lily Marlene. Did you ever hear it?
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's the neatest song. It's a German song. Underneath the lamppost by the Barry Gate. It's about a German talking about his girlfriend that is back home, and he's on the battle line, and when and the Germans, before I guess we got into war, they would broadcast that out of Europe to their troops in the Africa Corps down in Africa, and so of course the Brits did most of the war in Africa. So when the war was over in Africa, they said that they even claimed Lily Marlene, but it got so the Americans were singing it. And then all over Europe, wherever there were marching feet, man, GIs and everybody were singing, whistling, or humming Lily Marlene. Yeah, it was a great tune. Yeah. So when I came back, I soon looked that up and bought a couple of discs of that. Then Axel Sally was an American. She was a traitor. She went to Germany before the war to take up music. But when she played that program, what did I say it was called? Invasion Calling. She wasn't the one that would be singing Lily Marlene. That was a German girl, but she would be singing in English. And then there's other stuff, and then the girl would be talking and stuff like that. They'd come with the propaganda, like we're in Africa. And they'd say, hey, you GIs, you're down in North Africa with them dirty old Arabs and stuff. What do you think your wives are doing back home while you're over there? All that stuff. And the single guys would laugh at it, But it would get the older guys, the married guys to think about, I wonder if she's doing that at home. And the old guys get mad. And then she would bring on stuff about how you're going to get killed when you hit the beach of France and the secret weapons and all that kind of stuff. And so, of course, the military, the government, man, they had their eyes on her. They were going to get her when the war was over. But some of them babes that would get on there, man, with the voice that they have, gee, I said, man, I don't want to go home to war, so I want to go to Berlin, man. I want to meet that chick. And then she would sound off, man, the guys would be swooning. But when the war was over, Uncle Sam hadn't forgotten her. She was the first one that they looked for. Yep, and they looked for her. She went into hiding, and she knew that they were looking for her, but they wanted her to try her for treason. And finally, after a year looking for her, somebody had squealed on her over there in Berlin, in the British zone. And so they got her, and they brought her back to the States, and they tried her for treason. But she kind of got off easy. I think only 1 or 2 counts of treason. But then they locked her up for, I think she'd done 12 years. In a penitentiary in West Virginia. the guys would see her, and I saw her picture after the war. So, man, what would a guy be swooning over a babe like that? Her name was Mildred Gillers. I think she was from, I forget where she was, from Massachusetts or somewhere. But God, take one look at her, man. He wouldn't care what her voice was. That was it. But she died. They put her in a penitentiary, in a woman's penitentiary in West Virginia. Then I think she was paroled after, 11 or 12 years. Then she died of cancer, and well, she got it when she was paroled. She got a job teaching in a convent in West Virginia. Then she died of cancer. Now they say that she's buried in an unmarked grave down there in West Virginia. Yeah. But you know, there was all kind of music, and the GIs had all kind of songs, and when you got to England, man, you were king, because the GI had all kind of money. The British soldier didn't have any, and they liked the way the GI dressed, and yeah, there could be a lot of stuff written about the war, but like, it's stuff that they don't have today or wouldn't write about it. But then that's because everybody was in the war, too. The war was wherever you went. Yeah. You want to see a little Fury?
I think you said you had a couple things to show me and a couple rooms to take a look at.
Yeah, I'll show you the Fury one here. Or unless you're not done here.
No, let me stop this and